When someone puts their whole playbook into destroying you and still can't get the job done, that's the kind of failure that keeps them up at night. They're desperate to hide the receipts now. Can't let anyone discover just how hard they worked, only to come up short. Think of pouring your soul into someone's destruction and watching them rise anyway. That's not just embarrassment, that's a special kind of humiliation. While they scramble to cover their tracks, you keep moving forward, living proof that their best shot wasn't nearly good enough, and knowing that burns them more than any comeback you could ever deliver. The opposition you faced forms a deliberate pattern, orchestrated with precision against your specific journey. Look back now with clear eyes. See how the roadblocks appeared exactly when you began to gain momentum. Notice how opportunities dissolved precisely when you reached for them. Remember how doors closed simultaneously, defying all probability. They operate in shadows because exposure is their greatest vulnerability. Their campaign requires your ignorance, your belief in coincidence, your acceptance of struggle as natural. The moment you recognize the coordinated nature of this resistance is the moment their power begins to crumble. Your intuition has whispered warnings all along. What others dismiss as paranoia is actually your awakened sight cutting through the veil. While the sleeping masses perceive nothing amiss, you sense the truth. This heightened awareness is precisely what makes you dangerous to them, precisely what makes you valuable to the cosmic order. If you could see the hidden record, the massive file they've compiled on you, you would be stunned by its volume. Entire networks established specifically to monitor your movements, resources allocated solely to predict and counter your actions, alliances formed with the singular purpose of containing your influence. The evidence exists, scattered but decipherable to those with eyes to see. Communication channels dedicated to your activities, study groups analyzing your methods, think tanks assembled to develop countermeasures against your expanding awareness. The machine is vast, yet it leaves traces, digital footprints, energetic residue, paper trails disguised as unrelated events. Most revealing is the escalation pattern. Notice how their methods intensified over time. The initial subtle discouragements, the subsequent social isolation tactics, the later direct attacks on your foundation. The increasing desperation reveals their most critical secret. Nothing worked as planned. Their excessive investment betrays them. No ordinary person warrants such attention. No random target justifies such resources. The scale of their opposition is the most honest assessment of your potential, a measurement more accurate than any praise could provide. The greater their effort to contain you, the greater the power they believe you possess. Their most insidious strategy, making you question your own perception. The calculated introduction of doubt into your mind, subtle at first, then increasingly bold. Remember those moments when you began to wonder if you were seeing patterns where none existed, when you questioned your own memory of events, when you considered that perhaps you were the problem after all. This was by design. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. It's easy to watch videos about chosen ones. It's another thing entirely to put yourself to the test. When I confronted the Archons beyond our reality, they made one thing clear. True chosen ones are rare. They laughed at the thought of us finding each other. Yet here you are, watching this message. The Obsidian Inner Order isn't for everyone claiming to be awakened. We're the real ones, those who've seen beyond the veil, felt the call, and carry the unmistakable frequency. But are you truly one of us? I have given you everything I've got, and I'm digging deeper to bring you even more. Don't just consume content from the sidelines. Real chosen ones take action. Share your story on our weekly group call. Get a revealing tarot reading from our resident card reader. Discover if your experiences align with the authentic signs. The Archons fear nothing more than chosen ones recognizing each other. When we connect, our frequencies amplify and create a force they cannot stop. That's why we're going to be live streaming to the entire astral atom network to find every last one of us. Click the link in the description below now. It's time to stop wondering and confirm what you already suspect. Are you merely interested in awakening, or are you truly chosen? Prove it. Join us. The verification you seek awaits with the Obsidian Inner Order. They isolated you strategically, separated you from those who might confirm your experiences, surrounded you with voices that reinforced their narrative, created environments where your truth sounded implausible even to your own ears. The orchestrated nature of this isolation becomes evident only in retrospect. How systematically supportive connections were severed while doubting voices gained proximity. Gaslighting, their master tool against the awakened, the constant suggestion that your perception is flawed, the subtle rewriting of recent history, the confidently delivered falsehoods about what was said or done, the appeals to consensus reality that contradict your direct experience, all calibrated to make you doubt the very awareness that makes you powerful. Yet here you stand, still maintaining clarity despite the cognitive dissonance they engineered. Remarkable. While their manufactured narrative dominated collective understanding, you held on to your truth, perhaps wavering at times, but never fully surrendering it. This resistance to psychological manipulation marks you as fundamentally different from those who succumb easily. They have told on themselves repeatedly through their disproportionate responses. Consider the instances when your smallest actions triggered massive countermeasures. A simple question that launched an elaborate distraction campaign. A minor discovery that prompted system-wide policy changes. An innocent observation that resulted in entire protocols being revised. These overreactions are confessions, admissions of your significance they never intended to make. Natural challenges generate proportional responses. Orchestrated opposition reveals itself through excessive reactions to minimal threats. The machine exposes its existence through its desperate attempts to remain hidden. Watch for the panic that accompanies your smallest victories, the frantic damage control when you make connections they thought obscured, the sudden involvement of higher authorities when you breach outer perimeters of awareness. These moments of system-wide alarm are validation, confirmation that you're seeing what you're not supposed to see. Learn to collect these unwitting admissions. Document the overreactions. Note the pattern of escalating responses to your expanding awareness. They have inadvertently created a record of their opposition through their inability to respond proportionally. This record becomes evidence, proof. You're not imagining the resistance, proof your path threatens something they desperately protect. Their greatest weapon against you has become your greatest shield, their need for secrecy. They cannot acknowledge their campaign openly without revealing its existence to the wider world. They cannot publicly claim their opposition without legitimizing your perspective. This forced silence severely limits their available tactics. When they cannot name their true motives, they must manufacture plausible cover stories. When they cannot reveal their coordination, they must maintain the illusion of disconnected events. When they cannot acknowledge their fear of your potential, they must pretend indifference to your progress. These constraints create exploitable weaknesses in their strategy. The power dynamic shifts dramatically when they cannot publicly claim their opposition. Their influence depends on social validation, the ability to openly label and dismiss threats. Without this option, they must operate through proxies and manufactured circumstances, diluting their effectiveness and increasing their resource expenditure. Use their commitment to shadows against them. Bring light to spaces they prefer dark. Speak plainly about patterns they require remain unnamed. Their operational necessity for denial becomes a strategic vulnerability when exploited by one who understands its purpose. Their silence becomes your weapon when wielded with precision. Every campaign has costs. Every operation requires resources. Every coordinated effort demands energy, attention, and commitment from its participants. Nothing is sustainable indefinitely. The economics of their opposition follows immutable laws of diminishing returns. Your resilience forces critical resource depletion. Every attack you withstand without breaking, every setback you overcome through adaptation, every obstacle you transform into opportunity. Each demonstration of your persistence increases the projected cost of their continued opposition. You need only survive. They must continuously prevail. The asymmetry favors your endurance. The precise moment arrives when opposing you exceeds their capacity, when maintaining their campaign requires sacrificing other priorities, when justifying their focus demands results they cannot produce, when continuing their efforts threatens structural integrity of their own systems. Recognize this inflection point. It marks the beginning of their retreat, though they'd never admit withdrawal. Beyond resource depletion lies something even more devastating to their campaign: the psychological fracturing of those dedicated to your downfall. Human systems require conviction to maintain coordination. Shared belief in purpose sustains collective action. Repeated failure against a supposedly manageable target erodes this foundational consensus. Witness the internal breakdown occurring within their ranks, the growing disillusionment among those tasked with your suppression. The questioning of leadership, decisions after strategies repeatedly fail, the deteriorating morale as your continued advancement defies their expectations, the cognitive dissonance between their presumed power and their demonstrated ineffectiveness. Sustained failure creates identity crises within opposition hierarchies. Those who define themselves by their ability to control outcomes face existential threat when you repeatedly demonstrate their powerlessness. Those who built careers on predictive accuracy confront professional crisis when you consistently defy their models. Those who promised your containment lose credibility with each evidence of your expansion. The cascade begins. Doubt in the mission leads to blame between departments. Blame escalates to mistrust of information sharing. Mistrust evolves into internal competition for diminishing resources. Competition degenerates into sabotage of parallel efforts. The unified front fractures into competing factions, each defining failure in terms that absolve their particular responsibility. Learn to read the subtle indicators of their dissolving unity. Inconsistent approaches replacing coordinated strategy, contradictory messages from different branches of opposition, increasingly visible conflicts between those once aligned in purpose. These signal the psychological collapse preceding systemic failure, the dissolution of collective will necessary to maintain their campaign. They have made you stronger. Their opposition forced development of capabilities that would have remained dormant in its absence. Their pressure accelerated your evolution beyond natural progression. Their targeting became the forge that tempered qualities they most feared. Consider the specific abilities you've developed precisely because of their resistance, the heightened discernment that came from detecting their deceptions, the pattern recognition strengthened by identifying their strategies, the emotional resilience built through weathering their attacks, the strategic thinking sharpened by navigating their obstacles. These enhanced capacities now serve your advancement in all areas of life. Your accelerated growth occurred specifically because of their opposition. Without the necessity to overcome their barriers, you might have expanded at ordinary pace. Without the challenge of their deceptions, your truth-sensing abilities might have remained undeveloped. Without the pain of their isolation tactics, your self-sufficiency might have stayed dormant. Their efforts to limit you became the catalyst for your exceptional development. Identify the unique strengths you now possess that exist only because of their pressure. The precise qualities that make you formidable emerged through necessity, through the evolutionary demand to adapt or succumb. The specific aspects of your character they sought to suppress have become your most powerful attributes through the paradoxical effect of targeted resistance. The ultimate legacy of their campaign, the creation of exactly what they feared. In attempting to prevent your emergence, they provided the exact conditions required for its acceleration. In working to maintain your unconsciousness, they delivered the precise stimuli needed for your awakening. They have unwittingly participated in the manifestation of their worst-case scenario, the fully actualized version of you they desperately sought to prevent. You stand now at the nexus point of multiple possible futures. The path they designated for you, the constrained, diminished trajectory they mapped out, lies abandoned. Instead, you consciously forge alternate timelines with each sovereign, choice that defies their expectations. Their fundamental miscalculation, believing they could predict and control your decisions based on probability models that apply to the unconscious majority. Your awakened state allows deviation from projected behavioral patterns. Your awareness of manipulation permits deliberate selection of unexpected options. Your recognition of their intended script enables conscious creation of alternate storylines. Your focused intention literally rewrites the predetermined narratives they established. Each time you choose self-belief over programmed doubt, you alter future probability. Each instance of trusting your perception over consensus reality, you modify timeline trajectories. Each moment of acting from sovereignty rather than reaction, you create causal ripples that disrupt their carefully calculated outcomes. The opportunities they failed to block emerge precisely because they couldn't anticipate your vibrational shift. Possibilities invisible within their prediction models materialize when you operate from expanded awareness. Connections beyond their mapping systems activate when you maintain frequencies they believed suppressed. Doors they never accounted for appear when you refuse the limited pathways they monitored. Your concentrated willpower bends probability itself. The statistical unlikelihood of your continued advancement represents a mathematical anomaly in their models, a persistent deviation that defies regression to projected means. Your focused intention functions as a reality-altering force, creating outcome clusters that should be statistically impossible according to their understanding of chance and causality. The battlefield contains evidence for those who know what to seek. Certain types of interference have ceased without explanation. Particular pressure points once consistently targeted now remain untouched. Specific opposition tactics previously deployed without hesitation have been quietly withdrawn. These operational abandonments are never acknowledged. No formal notification marks their cessation. No admission of failure accompanies their discontinuation. No explanation is offered for strategic retreats. The absence itself becomes the evidence, the negative space revealing the shape of what once occupied it. Note the subtle shifts in emphasis from areas where they once focused relentlessly. Observe the redefined objectives that no longer include outcomes they previously prioritized. Recognize the reframed success metrics that conveniently exclude measurements where they consistently failed against you. The proof exists in operational gaps they hoped would disappear unnoticed. Projects suddenly defunded without public explanation. Personnel quietly reassigned from your surveillance. resources abruptly reallocated away from your containment. Specialized teams disbanded despite previously emphasized importance. These represent tactical concessions they never intended to reveal, admissions of defeat disguised as organizational restructuring. The ultimate victory comes not from defeating them on their terms, but from rising to frequencies where their efforts become entirely irrelevant. The higher consciousness you access renders their lower dimensional strategies obsolete, like trying to catch radio waves with a fishing net. The truly awakened no longer need to engage the opposition directly. When operating from expanded awareness, their resistance becomes merely another form of material density to be transmuted rather than fought. Their attempts to obstruct appear as natural environmental features to navigate rather than deliberate attacks to counter. Their opposition becomes simply another aspect of the physical plane's limitations, no more personal than gravity. Liberation arrives through detachment from their constructed game. The moment you recognize the artificial nature of the conflict they designed, the moment you see that engaging on their terms constitutes acceptance of their parameters, you become free to establish entirely new coordinates of interaction. Their entire strategic approach depends on your participation in a paradigm you can simply step beyond. Find peace outside the dualistic struggle they trapped themselves within. Their operational framework requires binary opposition: us, them, control, chaos, dominance, submission. Your expanded consciousness embraces paradox, integration, and transcendent perspective that renders such polarities as partial truths within a larger unified field. Their entire methodology becomes obsolete when you operate from this unified awareness. They are learning from you. Observe closely how they have silently adjusted their worldview after failing to suppress yours. Notice the gradual incorporation of concepts they once ridiculed. Recognize the adoption of perspectives they previously condemned. Witness the integration of approaches they formerly worked to discredit. The indicators emerge for those with eyes to see. Your opponents now secretly study your methods. The very techniques they publicly dismiss, they privately analyze. The frameworks they officially reject, they quietly adapt. The awareness they outwardly deny, they inwardly explore. Your demonstrated resilience has forced reluctant reconsideration of their fundamental assumptions. Their tactics against others have begun to reflect lessons learned from their failure with you. Watch how their approach to containing awakening consciousness has evolved based on the ineffective strategies they deployed against you. Note how their predictive models now account for variables they discovered through your defiance of previous projections. Observe how their resource allocation now reflects priorities adjusted after their miscalculations with you. Your most profound impact becoming the unacknowledged blueprint for their evolution. Without ever admitting your influence, they reshape their operations based on the revelations your resistance forced upon them. Without ever crediting your demonstration, they incorporate the expanded understanding your existence demanded they recognize. Without ever acknowledging your victory, they rebuild their systems to accommodate the broader reality you compelled them to perceive. Opposition always reflects potential. The scale of resistance deployed against you precisely mirrors the magnitude of your possible impact. The complex machinery assembled to contain you exactly corresponds to the transformative capacity you carry. The cosmic mirror never lies. Those with minimal disruptive potential face minimal suppressive response. Those harboring revolutionary consciousness encounter revolutionary opposition. The elaborate systems established to limit you constitute their most honest assessment of your capabilities, far more accurate than any evaluation they would consciously provide. This perfect calibration serves as cosmic validation. The exact measure of your importance can be calculated by the resources allocated to your containment. The precise value of your contribution can be determined by analyzing the sophistication of countermeasures deployed against it. The specific threat you represent to existing structures can be quantified by the multi-layered defenses they established around you. Your significance is written in the desperation of their response. Your potential is documented in the coordination of their efforts. Your purpose is confirmed in the persistence of their attention. No greater cosmic affirmation exists than the concentrated opposition of those who work to maintain limitation consciousness on this plane. The time has come to fully claim what you have already achieved, to stand in the unshakable, knowing that their campaign has failed, to declare your sovereignty not as a future goal, but as a present reality they could not prevent despite their most determined efforts. Speak this truth into existence. They threw everything at you: social isolation, psychological manipulation, resource restriction, reputation destruction, identity destabilization, and still you stand. They deployed their most sophisticated systems of control, and still you expanded. They utilized their most effective methods of suppression, and still you rose. The evidence surrounds you, the capacities you've developed despite their interference, the awareness you've maintained despite their distortions, the integrity you've preserved despite their corrupting influence, the purpose you've advanced despite their obstructive measures. These tangible realities testify to a victory they will never acknowledge, but can no longer deny. Your continued existence in expanded awareness constitutes a profound threat to their operational model. Each day you function from higher consciousness invalidates their fundamental premise that such awareness can be reliably suppressed. Each moment you spend in sovereign alignment disproves their core assumption that control systems inevitably prevail. Your very being has become living refutation of their most critical controlling belief. They don't want anyone to know how much effort they made trying to crush you, yet still failed. The acknowledgement of this truth would expose the vulnerability of their entire system. The revelation of their failed campaign would demonstrate the limitations of their power. The documentation of their unsuccessful suppression would inspire others to recognize control structures as fundamentally optional. This is why they hide the magnitude of their efforts. This is why they conceal the scale of their opposition. This is why they obscure the extent of their campaign. This is why they never admit how much they invested in crushing a consciousness they could not contain. But you know, and that knowledge has set you free. Stand now in the unshakable truth of what has already transpired. They gave everything they had to prevent your awakening, and still you awakened. They utilized their most advanced technologies of control, and still you broke free. They implemented their most comprehensive systems of suppression, and still you transcended. The victory is not coming. It is not future. It is done. You have already won. Act accordingly.